Recording in progress.
Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order on the Desert Water Agency Board meeting at June 20th, 2023 at 8 o'clock. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and if I could ask Secretary Treasurer McKenna to lead us. Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask that everyone's audio, that if you are on the meeting virtually, I'll ask you to mute your audio until you're ready to speak. And for those of us that are in the boardroom today, to please turn off or mute your electronic devices. And with that, I'll call on directors in roll call order for discussion and questions in the following order: Director Grasha, Director Bloomer, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, Vice President Bowman, and Paul Ortega, President. All votes will be conducted via roll call, and with that, I will ask Assistant Secretary Baca to conduct the roll call vote, or the roll call.
Director Grasha?
Here.
Director Bloomer?
Present.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
Present.
Vice President Bowman?
Here.
And President Ortega.
Present. Thank you. Move to item number 3 on the agenda. It's public comment on items not on the agenda today. So for those members in the of the public who are sitting here in the boardroom or who are online, if there is something that you would like to bring up to the board, that it's within our jurisdiction, but perhaps not on today's agenda, this is the time to do that. We're going to ask you to keep the comments to no more than 3 minutes. And as provided in the Brown Act, the board is prohibited from acting on items that are not listed on the agenda. So Assistant Secretary Baca, have we received any comments via email?
No comments have been received.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public attending virtually or in the audience today that would like to speak at this point? No? Okay. So we'll move on to item number 4, which is public comment on items that are listed on the agenda. Again, we'd like you to keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. If there's anybody on the call or in the audience that would like to speak at this time, please let us know. Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, which is number 5, the consent calendar items. Are there any items on the consent calendar that a member of this board would like to pull for discussion? All right, I don't see any, so I'll look for a motion.
Move the recommended action for item 5.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Great. So I have a first from Director Grasha and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha?
Yes.
Director Bloomer?
Yes.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
Yes.
Vice President Bowman?
Yes.
And President Ortega.
Aye. Thank you. Right, so we can move to item 6, which is a public hearing. And let's see, we have a separate script for that, apparently. This is the time and place set for the public hearing, 2023-2024 groundwater replenishment assessments for West Whitewater River Subbasin and Mission Creek Subbasin. And at this time, I'm going to ask our Assistant General Manager, Mr. Johnson, to present his report.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So following our presentation of the engineer's report of the groundwater replenishment and assessment program for 2023-2024 at our board meeting on May 16th, it was determined that funds should be raised by a replenishment assessment, and the board should set for a meeting today, a public hearing on that matter. As indicated in that report, for the West Whitewater and Mission Creek groundwater replenishment assessment should be $195 per acre foot. A copy of the notice for today's public hearing was sent out to all the pumpers back on May 25th of 2023, advising them of this hearing, as well as the recommended replenishment assessment that is to be considered. Also in the public record on May 25th, 2023, the notice of public hearing was published. A comparison of historic and proposed groundwater replenishment rates for DWA and Coachella Valley Water District is shown in Exhibit 8 of the engineer's report, which is attached. The fiscal impact to the agency, based on estimated production figures for West Whitewater River and also Mission Creek, that should have been added to this report. Less adjustment to operating fund production due to short-term customer use trends, the $195 per acre foot rate will produce approximately $1.8 million in revenue for the general fund, which is an increase of approximately $836,000 as compared to the current rate of $175 per acre foot. The $195 rate will also increase the source of supply expense to the operating fund by about $619,000, producing a net fiscal impact to the agency as a whole of $216,800. And Director Sines has reviewed the report. At this time, staff is recommending that the board open the public hearing, and after the public hearing process is complete, staff is recommending that board adopt resolution number 1303, 1304, 1305, and 1306. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. So with that, we'll open the public hearing. So this is a time for members of the public who are either attending virtually or who are present in the boardroom today to make comments on the proposed resolutions 1303, 1304, 1305, and 1306. And we're again asking that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. So do we have anyone who would like to make public comment at this hearing? Seeing none, we'll move on. I'll close the public hearing and open it up for discussion by the board. I'll start with Director Grasha.
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Director Bloomer,
I don't have any questions or comments.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I have a few. I was asked by a constituent to explain why Mission Springs Water District has an expense to us for replenishment. And it's fairly common, I think, among the public not to understand why, at least in Desert Hot Springs, why they see an item for Desert Water Agency on their bill. And it's significant. It's just my last bill, it was $15 or so. So I think just for the benefit of any of the public and maybe of the Mission Springs people watching, that they need to understand that the aquifer that they pump from is replenished from time to time as water is available by this agency, and this agency has to pay for that water. And currently we are paying, I think, around $230 an acre foot for water from the State Water Project, and we're passing on $195 to these private pumpers and Mission Springs Water District. So I just wanted to elaborate on that for the record.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
No comments.
Okay, and I have none, so I would think we can, I'll be looking for a motion and a second, please.
I move we authorize item 6A, recommended action.
Thank you. I'll look for a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
All four resolutions.
Oh, okay, I thought we were doing them one at a time, but yes. Okay. Okay, then it's, yes.
Would you like to proceed to do them all at the
Sure.
same time? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so I have a first from Director Gracia and a second from Secretary Treasurer McKenna. And may we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Yes.
and President Ortega.
Aye. Right, so with that, we will move on to action item number 7, which is a request to board adoption of fiscal year 2023-2024 operating, general, and wastewater budgets. Finance Director Sines, please.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. Attached to the staff report for your review is the final draft of the proposed operating, general, and wastewater fund budgets for the fiscal year 23-24. And this has been previously presented to you at the last board meeting on June 6, 2023. And since that time, when we provided all of the highlights for the budget as well as the draft, there have been the following revisions, and we've listed them out for you. In the operating fund, there was an addition of $10,200 to the Board of Directors fees, and this is to accommodate the proposed 4.2% increase to the per diem rate per day of service, as well as the potential addition of compensated trainings for the Board of Directors. Now, to note, these things have not been taken up for board action yet, but the budget has been added to accommodate them in the event that they are approved. There was a correction of a corrupted formula which produced an incorrect amount of depreciation added back to the funds available for capital additions. And so this adjusted the funds available by $394,800 more available for capital additions. And that was on page 6 of the attached budget. And to accommodate these adjustments, there was an adjustment to the reserve for operations, decreasing the draw of reserves by $385,000. This reduction incorporates the adjustments made to the board director's fees, as well as that increase for available funds for capital additions. Moving on to the general fund, there was an adjustment to the replenishment assessment charge revenue, so the RAC revenue, due to a calculation error that was located during quality control review. This increased the RAC revenues collected by private pumpers by $183,800, and that occurred on page 17 of the attached report. There was a minor rounding adjustment to the East Branch enlargement. There was an addition of $9,600 to the Board of Directors fees, again to accommodate the second half of those revisions to the potential changes in the Board of Directors fees. So because 50% goes to the operating, 50% to the general fund. And that occurred on page 18. And lastly, there was an increase of $184,260 to the reserve for non-state water project additional water reserve to offset the revisions to the RAC revenue, director's fees, and a minor calculation error that was located during quality control review, which duplicated the customer account expense category. That correction was on page 18, and the correction to the reserves, the adjustment to the reserves is on page 21. Moving on to the wastewater fund, there were no changes to the proposed budget since the last presentation to the board, so it all remains the same. Staff recommends that the Board of Directors adopt the operating, general, and wastewater fund budgets for fiscal year 23 and 24. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Let's start with Director Gracia.
I don't have any questions. I appreciate all the time you spent on this. I watched the last meeting 3 times, just so you know. I didn't miss a thing. So
There was a lot
I
there.
appreciate. Yes, it was. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No questions or comments.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I have a few. it's no secret I have less experience in running a water district than anyone else in the room. And I came to this from the private sector. So when we sat down with this budget on April 11th in Finance Committee, I had a metaphorical scalpel in my hand to cut out all the fat that was going to be in there. And it's an unused scalpel at this point. This is not an agency that wastes money. This is a very thorough budget, very carefully prepared, and I'm impressed, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman?
No comments or questions.
Thank you. I do have a few comments, questions as it relates to the conservation budget, because it's a little, it looks like it's being split between the operating and the general, and so it's a little hard to understand what the overall impact is. So I don't know if we want to start with you, Director Sines, and then maybe move to Mrs. Metzger, or what would be the best way?
Yes, absolutely. So the conservation budget is split 50-50 between the general fund and the operating fund. So in order to ascertain the full budget, we add them together to get the full budget for the conservation. And the same goes for the turf, which is a subset of the conservation. And that is the reason it is split, because some of the funding source does come from other areas within the agency as well. And so we're able to expand the ability for us to provide conservation funding to areas that may not be in our service area, our retail water area. We can expand it into the Desert Hot Springs area as well. And in addition to that, if Ashley would like to, if she has any additional information she would like to add.
So if I'm looking at the information we were provided in the board packet, when I see in the operations budget something called turf buyback at 1.845 million, and then I see something in the general called conservation, which looks like 2.162 million. What is that 2.162 for? Is that for the turf buyback, or is that for a combination of things?
It is a combination of the both, and I guess that is a little confusing. In future budgets, we can split apart so it's consistent in both areas. But on the general fund side, it is all combined, but that same amount that is in the operating fund for the turf buyback is included there as well.
So if I'm looking at the operations budget, I see conservation and turf buyback, and if I combine those two, it's essentially the same number in the general fund.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Yeah, I would be interested to hear from Mrs. Metzger about the program for the coming year, as far as any significant changes that we'd be looking at in conservation, and also if we have any more insight into what the city of Palm Springs might be doing in support of that.
Yes, thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. We are looking at Desert Water Agency having $3.69 million in turf removal this year. And we're anticipating, based on our latest conversations with the city, that they will have either $1 or $1.2 million in turf removal funding to support our program. We've talked with them about making that a flexible program and also pairing it with our funding in a way that will make it more sustainable, so we don't have this boom and bust cycle with, starting $6 projects and then going back to $3. So what I think we look to do is to do $3 from Desert Water Agency per square foot, and then pair that with $1 per square foot from the city, given our respective budget levels.
And do we know when the city will be approving their budget?
I believe they are doing that this week on Thursday.
Okay, so by the end of this week, we should have a pretty good idea of what our program is going to look like in combination with the city, at least as it relates to turf.
Well, we'll have a good idea of the overall amount. We are still going to need, their staff is working through the Sustainability Commission and through the city manager's office to make sure that there's adequate buy-in to the approach on how the money is spent. In essence, matching that $3 with the $1 and making sure that the funding from the city can be applied to all types of projects without caps. That's not something that they've yet fully vetted. So I think that they need a little bit of time after working through kind of our recommendations on how they might approach the best utilization of those funds. they need to, get all of their ducks in a row internally to make sure that that makes sense. So I think we're probably looking at an August rollout of the augmented, what would be a $4 per square foot program if the city's amenable to approaching it the way that we've suggested. And all indications so far are yes. The Director of Sustainability has been very supportive of that approach, but she has to coordinate with a few more folks.
Great. So it looks like overall we're seeing a reduction this year over last year in our own budget with regard to turf programs, but a significant increase in other programs. Can you elaborate on that a little bit as far as those other programs?
Yes. Well, our approach with turf last year, we started off with a smaller budget and did come back to the board when more funding was necessary. So it's not out of the picture entirely that if these funds were depleted, that we wouldn't come back to the board. We just didn't want to put ourselves in a position of asking for too much and leaving it unused. And with regard to the other conservation programs, we are looking at starting some new programs. One program that I believe Director McKenna had mentioned previously during meetings was a residential toilet program. This is something Desert Water Agency used to do, but stopped doing several years ago because essentially all of the toilets on the market were the 1.28 gallons per flush or less. Now we're going to do an ultra low flow toilet incentive. So that's a new program this year. And then we're also looking to do a new hospitality suite program where we work with hotels and really do a holistic look. We go in and do an audit and then make recommendations based on that audit on things that they would improve. And those improvement recommendations would come with the offering of a rebate or incentive on some items. For example, cooling towers, pre-rinse spray nozzles, combi ovens. There are these big, large devices in hotels that are really behind the scenes that could help them save quite a bit of water. So we're going to do a more tailored approach there and see how that works.
Thank you. So I have no additional questions or comments, so we can proceed to, I'll look for a motion.
I move to authorize item 7, request the adoption of fiscal year budget 2023-2024, the operating general fund and wastewater budget.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. So I have a first from Director Gracia and a second from Secretary Treasurer McKenna. Roll call vote, please.
Director Gracia,
Yes.
Director Bloomer,
Yes.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Yes.
Vice President Bowman,
Yes.
and President Ortega.
Aye. Thank you. So I don't know if, since our general manager is not here, is our assistant general manager prepared to take on his role as the report?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll go through this report. Thank you, President Ortega. So the first item is our outreach efforts. This is really in regards to our Prop 218. Our outreach department's been very busy. We've had community workshops. There was one held here at the agency. I think President Ortega attended that with maybe one other person, I think, in attendance. We also had one in Cathedral City at the Senior Center. There was one resident who attended that. And actually, there were two who attended that. And then there was another workshop that was held out in Desert Hot Springs. That was for the RAC increase. Unfortunately, no one attended that workshop either. So, but as far as Prop 218, notices were mailed out to all customers. There's a dedicated website online with an online protest form. Direct emails to and meetings with large users were held. Media interviews with Joey English, and there was updates via the City of Palm Springs newsletter and one PS. And of course, the board is considering adopting rates at a public hearing on June 28th at 8 a.m. in our boardroom.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So all of these meetings that you just referred to, these were advertised. I recall, I think, a segment on KSQ that I saw. I think you mailed to every ratepayer in the district. Is that right?
That is correct. And Ms. Metzger, that's correct. Was there other?
Yes, sir. We also had notifications on social media regarding each one of the workshops. So we made people aware in a variety of ways. And unfortunately, this time of year is a little harder to garner attendance. And I think that, this is our first 218 process post-pandemic. And what we did see is that people did view the workshop online afterwards. It's just we did not get people that really wanted to show up and come to the meeting. So having it available for people to watch on demand in the convenience of wherever they choose to be seems to be the best method. But we did have a little bit of a tougher time of it. The other thing we did differently this time than back in 2016 was we had targeted meetings with large users. And I think that proved to be really effective. We reached out to them and offered to provide an analysis of their rates and met with them one-on-one to the extent that they were interested in doing that. So I think that helped a little bit. Large HOAs had a direct line to us rather than having to send representatives to a meeting.
Thank you.
Please continue.
All righty. The second item, Ms. Metzger, you might be more familiar with this than I am.
Yes. I'm happy to discuss this. So we're, our long awaited regional water conservation study is in the very nascent stages. We released a request for proposals to complete the study. So we're finding our vendor who would actually do the work of the study on behalf of the region, using all of our data and input to guide the process. And the proposals were due earlier this month. Unfortunately, we only received one, but it was from a team where I knew every name of the people on the project team, and they were from different companies and had different fields of expertise, but they were all very well known in the world of conservation. So we're still, as a group, analyzing the proposal and deciding whether or not to award. And we did get one letter in addition to the proposal indicating why another firm did not respond, and they felt like they would take an entirely different approach than what we proposed. So we're taking the time to meet with them this week and hearing them out too, because we really want to make sure that we use this grant funding as effectively as possible. It's, $150,000 of grant funding. And what we want at the end of the day is to end up with a tool that will help us make the best decisions about funding levels for grass removal at, budget wide and at the per square foot or project level, and also be more competitive for grant applications at the state and federal level. So we want to make sure that we end up with what we want at the end of the day. And we're in the early stages of making sure that will happen. And I am glad to hear that we did get a response, because I will let you know that for the urban water management plan that we did regionally, the first time we put it out to bid, we did not get any responses. So these kind of niche regional projects can be a little bit difficult to get vendors to respond to. So we are taking it seriously, and we did put a lot of effort in calling and emailing and checking in with people to get them to respond. And so we'll let the board know. The contract with the vendor would have to come before the Desert Water Agency Board, because we are the ones kind of managing and spearheading the process.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna has a comment or a question.
Yeah, I wanted to hope that this regional study will look at the question of aligning the incentives between the water agencies. The Desert Water Agency, Coachella Valley, and Mission Springs all have different incentives for different things. And it would be nice if we could find out what works best, and all of us adopt the same thing. Some of us have, toilet rebates, some don't. Some have smart meter rebates, and and Coachella Valley has a smart irrigation controller rebate. Then they will come and install it for you. Now, we don't have the personnel to do that. But if you sat 3 people down, one from Palm Desert, one from Palm Springs, and one from Desert Hot Springs, they would have completely different options with conservation. And I think we could rationalize them, coordinate them. That would be an excellent thing. And then we could perhaps do a
Yes.
combined publicity effort as well.
Yes, I think there would be value in that. The scope of the study is not really intended to go where you're talking about, but I think what it will do is it will set the group up to come to terms on, what makes sense in terms of grass removal, and, what makes sense for an agency like Desert Water Agency may be very different than an agency like Mission Springs, who does not import water. So there are different values and budgetary constraints and considerations that each agency will have. And of course, staffing, as you mentioned, direct install programs like Coachella Valley's for smart irrigation controllers are very staff and time intensive. So we've elected to still incentivize smart irrigation controllers, but just in a different way. But I do absolutely see the value in having certain programs that are consistent amongst the agencies. And I am going to be talking with the Conservation and Public Affairs Committee about one idea on that coming up soon. So I appreciate your comment, and we will get creative and try and think of ways to bring everybody to the table and think about how we could be more consistent so that we could leverage the CV water counts messaging we already have to better communicate our programs.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Metzger, for that. Right. The next item on the report, of course, the agency will be closed on Tuesday, July 4th for Independence Day.
I believe Director Gracia has a question.
Yes, Director Gracia.
Just was reminded by this that I have on occasion passed by the building before I was on the board and noticed a giant American flag out front.
That's correct.
Like this, I just hope to encourage you to continue that.
Yes. Yeah, that was started by GM Luker for 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day. He felt it was very important for us to
It's always nice to see, and it's like almost refreshing. So I appreciate that continuing.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Director Gracia, on that. The next item is our United Way campaign. And Ms. Hopping, would you like to discuss this? This is something that's very dear to the agency, but Chris is.
I'm the volunteer president of United Way of the Desert, and so I've been involved with it ever since I worked at the other water agency, and I was told you're running the campaign. So it's been about over 20 years. And this year our team here did pledges that was 33% higher than our previous years. We haven't been able to do really an in-person one because of COVID. And we do a rollover campaign, which is great. So people just continue their donations. And we didn't have anybody reduce or stop donating. We just had people increase, which was really great. And we get a lot of support from obviously management here and staff here. So we're doing a Ben and Jerry's party to celebrate and to thank the staff. So that will be on July 12th from 2 to 3:30, and you're all welcome to attend. And we're going to have a Sunday bar.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris, for that. And as I said,
I think everyone should
yes.
increase their contribution by 4.2%.
The next item is the human resource meetings and activities. And Chris had conducted a couple interviews for water service worker 1. And I think once that position is filled, we're fully staffed again. Is that correct? Yeah. Perfect.
Great.
Some webinars and so forth. Lincoln Financial representative was on site, and the next item is our leak report. 24 leaks over roughly a 2-week period. It's typical of what we're seeing. Of course, Avenida Caballeros, which is under contract right now. We are working with that contractor. We have been advised that some of the material will take maybe 40 weeks to get. So, 40. Yeah, so we're trying to see if we can get that expedited. Yeah, that's almost a year. And we are doing our design work for Luella Road. And the last items are the GM's meetings and activities. General Manager Kraus is very busy, a lot of meetings. The Tribal Mediation Tech Team Review with CBWD. He attended one of the Prop 218 workshops. We had our Mission Creek Subbasin GM meeting. There was the State Water Contractor Monthly Board meeting, the Sites Monthly Joint Reservoir Committee and Authority Board meeting, and our monthly DWA CVWD MWD coordination meeting that is held, and several activities that are ongoing. And with that, that concludes the GM report, unless there are any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Director Gracia?
No questions, no comments, thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
No questions, thanks.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
I have none, thanks.
Okay. Vice President Bowman?
None from me.
Okay, none from me, so thank you. And we'll move on to item number 9, Directors' Reports on Meetings, Events attended on behalf of the agency. So I'm asking each board member, if you have something to report out at a meeting or an event that you recently attended on behalf of the agency, to please start with the date and the name of the event and proceed from there. So we'll start with you, Director Gracia.
See, our last board meeting was on the 6th of January, so the meetings that I attended were on virtual attendance at the American Waterworks Association on the 10th, 11th through the 14th. And I attended almost every one of them that was possible as they flowed through each day. And I can tell you that my general takeaway from that experience, which was that, they covered subjects that were so broad, and it was just nice to be reassured that everything that they touched on throughout those were things that we're already involved with here at this agency. So it's good to be reassured that this agency's on top of things. The budget we just passed allows us to stay on top of things, and it was very helpful. Also, one meeting that fell in during those days was the CVWD board meeting. I watched that online as well. So then we had the Sites Authority meeting that I attended, not compensated, which was on the 16th, I believe. An interesting thing of note was I had written a opinion piece that appeared in the Desert Sun newspaper that mentioned Sites project, and somehow that made its way to the Sites Authority and now appears on their website as in their news briefs. As well, it was covered by Mavens, which is a statewide news aggregator, I guess, for water subjects throughout California. So that was interesting to see. And I believe that brings us to today. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank
Did
you.
I get all the dates in there? I believe so.
I think we're fine. Director Bloomer.
I have nothing.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
On June 6th, which is the date of our last board meeting, I went to Mission Springs board meeting that afternoon where they were discussing budget, which we had also done on June 6th. They have a very, very comprehensive budget presentation, thoroughly dissected by the directors. It was impressive to watch. Then I proceeded from there to the City of Desert Hot Springs council meetings. Same day, budget meeting again. Quite a lot of dissension at that meeting about budget, but it shows, a good policy debate going on. I then attended the American Water Works Association from June 11th to 15th. And this is a massive event. I think it had about 10,000 participants, an exhibition hall that it's a mile if you walk around it. So I focused my attention for the days I was there on technology and introduction of technology and replacement of assets. I think those are two challenges. I know that Vice President Bauman and I will be digging into technology soon, so I was trying to brief myself on that. There's a lot of exciting stuff coming down the pipeline, if you excuse the pun. But I think it was extremely helpful for me. Yesterday, Juneteenth, I again attended Mission Springs Water District, and they finalized their budget. They mentioned a few things that I thought are important here. One was water safety. It's the summertime, the kids are out of school, they're enjoying themselves at the pool. It's a recipe for tragedy. Let's all be careful out there, not to let that happen. They mentioned that the Chrome 6 standard was close to being finalized by the state. It doesn't seem to be a major issue with our wells, but in the Mission Springs area, it is an issue. And I want to get a little bit further into the water quality of the water that's taken out of the aquifer, because I have a constituent telling me that the chromium 6 levels in some of the wells in Mission Springs district approaches 27 parts per million, which is nearly 3 times the standard. I wasn't able to confirm that from the data we have here, but I think we should investigate that. I noticed that there is a water serve request in from a development on Palm Drive opposite the golf course, which is down on Avenue 20, which will bring in 612 new residences and increase the water demand in that area by about 400 acre-feet per year. So there's not a lot of growth in this part of the district, but there is growth happening. So the whole question of the growth occurs incrementally, but the assets have to be put in place in lump sums. We are ahead of us. We have still got some investment to do. So I just wanted to note that in passing. That's all I have.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman?
Nothing on compensable that I attended. However, I was asked by the Desert Hot Springs Development Director, Sean Smith, to meet with NBC reporter Brooke Berry and talk about the water, hot water in Desert Hot Springs, the spas, with my former background as a hotelier and owning a hot water spa. And we met on 6/15 and had a wonderful discussion, shared with her my perspective on the hot water of the Desert Hot Springs and the cold water over there as well. So it will be, I think there's about 4 or 5 segments. I will be on one of the segments at some point. There was nothing planned, or I saw no schedule of when this will appear on NBC4, but I was very honored to be able to do that.
Great, thank you. So I also attended the AWWA conference in Toronto from the 10th or 11th to the 15th in person. It seems that most of the presentations that I ended up participating in or attending had to do with PFAS. And I'm not sure that I really planned it that way, but it sort of worked out that way. Some of them were incredibly research-oriented, which I was really glad to see that there's a lot of research happening out there for obvious reasons. And it was, although way over my head in terms of science, it was refreshing to see that there's actually a lot happening in that field. But it really did get me to thinking about, and similar to the comments that Secretary Treasurer McKenna made about chromium-6, I don't know that we've talked enough about that here in this boardroom or with our neighboring water agencies as far as what that impact looks like, not only in terms of health, but also in terms of cost to the various water agencies. One of the things that was really interesting is the differentiation between removing these chemicals, these forever chemicals, from the water that's being delivered, as well as what to do with the residue afterward. And so that's what a lot of the research actually was focused on, not only how to remove the chemicals, but also how to destroy them in a way that is still environmentally sound. And what came out of that conversation, because there were quite a few presentations on that, was that there's so much more to do there, and it's going to cost a lot of money. But that's probably another conversation for down the road. And that was the only event that I attended within the last 2 weeks. Thank you. So now we can move to item number 10, which is director's comments and requests. I'll start with Director Grasha. Do you have any?
I have one comment, kind of tailgating on your comments about chromium-6. On August 2nd, there's a hearing scheduled in Sacramento in the Coastal Hearing Room at the California Environmental Protection Agency at 1001 I Street in Sacramento. Notice of for a potential proposed rulemaking for chromium-6 standard that I believe we've all been informed of what it will be. It appears that number hasn't changed, but they will be taking public input and are preparing to issue a ruling sometime around Christmas, I guess. So the first of the year could be just right after the first, but right quick. I've been following this for probably 15 years, way over 10 years anyway, because the last 3 homes that I've owned or lived in were all in areas where the numbers were very high. And it's not something that's talked about in the neighborhood meetings. You don't hear it, but it's a health issue that I think that I agree. We're going to be looking at, we're lucky, people in Palm Springs and Cathedral City, not to have any worry about this issue. But there are people within the boundaries of our district that do have an issue. And the potential economic impact, health effects aside, could all get dumped in our lap. I have no doubt that that's a possibility in our lap. I'm talking about this agency. So it's my suggestion at some point that we consider establishing a section in the budget for someone within our engineering department to follow this closely and to, be the eyes and ears on the issue, if you will. And hopefully that Mission Springs will be able to work this out without having to fold their tent. But the economic decisions that they've been making recently put them in a precarious situation as a result of this potential rule. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
No comments, thanks.
Okay. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
I know we are planning a joint visit to the reclamation facility not reclamation facility, the replenishment facility on Worsley Road with Mission Springs. I wondered if we might offer city council members of Desert Hot Springs to tag along to that. I don't mean to make the scheduling any harder than it already is, but when we set a date, perhaps we could ask them if they'd like to attend. And the reason I'm suggesting it is I think there is a recreational opportunity at that facility that we've missed. You know, Desert Hot Springs is very, very short of parks space. It's making great strides in its recreation facilities, but there's something that I think could happen there that we should investigate. And the same also applies when we have a reclamation facility. Some districts that I've noticed at these conferences are turning the reclaimed water into, you know, wetlands and habitat for wildlife that people can visit. And I know we have a small reclamation facility, but Mission Springs has 2, or will have 2. I think there's some opportunities there we could all participate in. So that's just thought to put out there. That's it for me.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman?
None, thank you.
Okay, and I have none. So with that, we can close the public meeting and proceed to the closed session. Let's see, I see 8:51, so if we could start at 9 o'clock with closed session. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
So we're reconvening into open session. We don't have any reportable action from closed session. And with that, we can adjourn the meeting for today. Thank you.